What is going on? Thank you guys for listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
And I'm your co-host for a slightly different episode today, and slightly confused.
Yes, this is a slightly different episode than what you guys are normally used to. I'm your other co-host, Josh, and we are joined by our on-again, off-again co-host, Billy.
Hey guys, how everybody doing?
Well, thanks for being here. And today we are going to be sitting down with a stuntman who started his career off doing Cabin Fever. He's also worked on a number of projects ranging from Drake and Josh to Eastbound and Down to a little bit of everything in between. We're here to talk today to Preston, the Bunnyman Corbell, sorry. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and I love that you mentioned Drake and Josh. I haven't had that mentioned yet. That's awesome.
I am the youngest person on this call. I grew up with Drake and Josh, so but yeah, thank you. That's awesome to hear. I'll kick things off for you because I've been wanting to ask this for a long time. How does someone actually get into the field of stunt work? Sorry, Billy.
Yeah, that was kind of all of our first questions.
I mean, that's everyone's main question, right? It's hard to answer, but you got to be an athlete foremost. I mean, there's a lot of ex-Olympians, ex-NBA players, ex-football players that are trying to get into stunts. So we're talking about elite athletes that you have to compete with. So you have to be really good at one sport: martial arts, horseback riding, car driving. You just have to be really good at one thing to get your foot in the door. But you have to be elite. I mean, you have to be very top of the game as an athlete to even start trying to get into stunts. But the easiest way I tell everyone is to get really familiar with film work, filmmaking. Do your own stuff, do your own shorts, you do your own directing, writing, all that stuff. Get familiar with film. So when you do have that opportunity to get your foot in the door, you know exactly what's going around and what's going on set. So you don't look kind of like a dunce.
So how does it work? Like we mentioned Drake and Josh, but it has like IMDb has you listed as uncredited. And I've seen that with a lot of actors.
Yeah.
How does that work being uncredited, but part of the movie at the same time?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of crew members, but stuntmen, we're behind the scenes, so we make the actors look good. We don't always get credit for that. We don't always get seen, and no one really knows who we are. So that comes with the territory. But when you're on something like Drake and Josh and you don't get credited for it, you were a part of the production. Just uncredited means your name did not appear on the screen, and a lot of times stuntmen aren't appearing on the screen anyway, so that's what that means. So you are included in production, just the word uncredited means you weren't actually on the screen as your name.
Yeah, that's just something I've always been curious about because Jean-Claude Van Damme was uncredited in Electric Boogaloo 2. So
and a big name, right? Like, why isn't he credited? But yeah.
Yeah, and Olivia Wilde, most recently, Olivia Wilde was Gozer in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and she was uncredited.
Well, a lot of the Jasons and Michael Myers and a lot of those actors, stuntmen, go uncredited, and they were a huge part of those films. So it's just part of the territory, unfortunately.
Y'all look confused.
I was waiting for Billy if he had a question.
I thought Mark was still going. So how did you fall into Cabin Fever? How did you end up on the movie, doing the stunts and everything?
So I was dating someone at the time who was involved in some big production stuff. I got an invite into Cabin Fever and was able to just start as body double work, and then I got the opportunity to do stunt work with a small crew. We kind of all knew something big was brewing, but it was a small event, small crew, small movie. Obviously, Eli Roth's birth into what he is so iconic for now. But and I got to wear the bunny costume, which was really cool. So that led on to I worked on 3 different Cabin Fever films with the bunny costume. So just started as an invite, but you got to make everyone gets that opportunity. You got to make the most out of it, and I just happened to make a 20-year career out of it. So
one of the things that I'm curious about, and I'm mostly curious about this because I actually just finished a few months ago down Eastbound and Down like from start to finish for the first time, and I loved the series. But you ended up being Danny McBride's stunt double on that. What is it like to kind of be a stunt double for an actor, especially on a more comedic series like Eastbound? I really wouldn't think that there wouldn't be a need for stunt doubles. But what does it look like to be a stunt double, like the relationship between the actor, etc.?
I've done a lot of series, so a lot of series you don't think, or a lot of TV shows you don't think there's stunts, but there's a lot. I mean, like Drake and Josh has stunts, so there's a lot of stuff you wouldn't expect to have stunts. But Danny McBride, he did stunts, and I had a mullet for I think what was it 4 or 5 years we did that show, and I was doing Winter Hill at the same time, so I was I was husky with Danny McBride, and I got to use my words carefully, and I was slender on One Tree Hill, but I kept those opposite weights for a couple seasons during a year's time. So that was difficult. But Danny McBride's awesome. Will Ferrell was always on set, and he later on had a role in the show. We had Brooke Shields on set. Her husband was an executive producer. So it was really just a real fun set to be a part of, kind of like a family atmosphere. And I got to be Danny McBride's stand-in, body double, and stunt double. So I was there every day. I got to work every day with him, and that was definitely a special experience. And kind of that made him really big. That made him kind of a household name, that show.
With things like The Punisher and Daredevil being involved with that, and how Marvel can keep things kind of tight-lipped until they're ready for things to leak out. What was it like working on those series like that became so popular later on?
So those were kind of the tail end of my career, and I wanted to do Marvel and DC and all that cool stuff because I hadn't done it. And I did a lot of practical stuff when you think of like Jason and those movies where you're rolling down the stairs and get hit by cars and all that cool practical stunts. And then Marvel's a lot of green screen, a lot of wire work, a lot of different stuff. So I wanted to experience that. But those are very close knit. Yeah, it's a big movie, it's a big show, but very close knit crew. As you said, a lot of people don't talk about it outside of that set. But it's definitely a really cool environment, really exciting. There's a lot of action going on, and that's just a very different type of stunt work that I hadn't done before, and definitely cool to end my career doing that kind of stuff.
And I saw you were in Grimm. What kind of things did you do in the Grimm series?
So Grimm actually had some pretty decent stunts in that. That was a pretty good show. Daniel Baldwin was in that. I got to be Daniel Baldwin's stunt. I think he was in it for like 2 episodes. But I got to do a lot of practical stunts. I got to do a lot of driving stuff. Just pretty much, they call it utility stuntmen. So whatever's needed for that day, we do. So we're not specifically for one character. We do stunts of whatever's needed. So I did a lot of utility work on that show.
Got you.
Obviously, it's going to change from project to project, but one of the things that when we started initially kind of having a conversation about what this episode would be, we talked specifically about what the mental health aspect would be in terms of being a stuntman. Actors, I have many friends who are actors. I have friends that are first unit ADs and editors, and there's a level of like fear and faith that come in like lines like that where you're not necessarily sure where your next meal's coming from or your next job's coming from. But when you're in such changing environments, ranging from the wild world of Nickelodeon to the dark and grim world of Eli Roth to something like Veronica Mars or One Tree Hill, how are the environments that you're around and the people that you're constantly around, how are they affecting your mental health going from one place to another?
So it's such a good question, but extremely loaded question that I can't touch on everything. As far as stuntmen and mental health, we're athletes. I work I'm a sports psychologist, so I work directly with athletes. Athletes kind of go through something that normal public doesn't go through. You have an athlete who had a football in his hand at 3, and now he can't play when he's 30, and that was his entire life that he gave up just to play that sport. Now it's gone. So the normal public's not going to understand that, but the athlete mind will. And my main thing of being a stuntman and mental illness and learning how to just move on was pain tolerance and learning how to deal with injuries. I was constantly injured. You have to have mental toughness, but when you're injured, you have to get up out of bed and you have to do the stunt. And you're there to be in the place of the actor, because the actor gets the big bucks, and you don't have that opportunity to lay down on the ground and whine because you're injured. You have to have that mental toughness to persevere. And I would say, like, when I'm gaining 250 or 230 pounds and I'm going down to 170 in a year's time, that's massive. Mental. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to be that devoted to something. But as you did touch on, that's really how we make money, and we have to have those mental barriers and strengths in place, because we won't make money. We won't get a paycheck. As far as how different sets are, like you said, Nickelodeon could be different than One Tree Hill. It depends on what the show's going through. One Tree Hill had a whole. I think it was 2 episodes of a school shooting. It was right after a major school shooting, and the set, I think E was there, Entertainment Tonight, and it was just so somber, and everyone was very serious, and we really joked a lot on that set, and we didn't for those 2 weeks. So it's very what that scene is. The actors have to be in a certain mindset. So it just depends on the set you're on and what the actors are going through. So everything's different, but you do have to always be track of your mental health.
You mentioned like injuries were just like a regular part of the job. Were there any times that the injuries kind of almost outweighed the job itself to a point where you thought about possibly leaving a set or not coming back after a project was done?
I have a laundry list of injuries that are boring, so I won't go into, but towards the end of my career, I couldn't stay healthy. I was just injury after injury after injury, and it just got to a point where I couldn't stay healthy, and it's just I couldn't have a job. I couldn't keep a job because I wasn't healthy. So it gets to that point. But unless my body completely gives up, I'm going to be there every day. So, and that's part of being a stunt manager. You can't have fear when you're doing utility work and, hey, you need to do this tomorrow and it's something crazy, but you need to do it because that's your job and that's what we're there for. So you can't have that fear aspect of it.
And I'm guessing a lot of it had to do, for you had to be, some of that had to be fun at the same time, doing some of this stuff. And the driving and things like that had to just be a blast. At the same time, the risk is always in the back of your mind.
You try not to put the risk there at all. You have the best people around you, especially when you're working with big production. You just have the best possible help, and everyone's there to keep everyone safe. But the risk is always there, as you said. But I mean, there's sometimes when you do stunts where you're like, this is pretty fucking awesome, and I get paid for this. So you definitely have some cool stories later in life, you can tell.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Well, I notice it's a lot of positivity and everything. What helps you stay positive even whenever you do go through like the injuries and all the bad things that could happen?
You have to look forward. So when I get injured, I look forward to the next injury. So if I twist my ankle, but then I break my arm, then when I break my arm, I'm not worried about my ankle. My ankle doesn't hurt anymore. Now it's my arm. So you gotta look at the positives, because we're always going to face injuries, and we're always going to be, deal with some kind of mental something, as everyone does. But just always try to find a positive way to move forward.
Right.
Being a horror podcast, and you starting your career specifically with Cabin Fever, as we previously talked about here, I just actually had seen it for the first time a couple weeks ago, and the character of the Bunny Man is almost kind of like I think like the best way that I can compare it to another pop culture icon would be the scene of the guy in like the tuxedo and the guy in the bear suit from The Shining, where it's like a weird, like, blink and you miss it kind of moment. You're like, I'm not sure why this is in here, but you got brought back for the sequels and the prequel that they ended up doing. But yeah, like I think like my question for you is like specifically with the Bunny Man and being that is now also a nickname that you've kind of done yourself. How does it kind of feel to have that like iconic status, or to have a moment in horror history that is now just iconic in one of the most like gruesome, bizarre films of the early 2000s?
Bunny Man's awesome, and there's fun stories to tell. I get to go to conventions and interact with people. Someone came up to me last week and told me it's my favorite meme I've had over 20 years is that Bunny Man scene. So, and it's kind of the Easter egg that Eli Roth put in the film. But the great story about, and you mentioned it with the bear, the great story about Eli Roth is his favorite film was The Shining, and he loved that bear scene, and that was the Bunny Man was that in Cabin Fever. So that was his ode to The Shining. So pretty cool to be a part of that, and got to do it later on. Cabin Fever 2 was filmed in North Carolina, where I did a lot of my work. So definitely iconic. It's such a 3-second scene that just led on to the rest of my career. But pretty iconic for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
With that, with something like that, and you've had a fairly extensive career across the board from all kinds of genres, was there any like one or two particular projects you worked on that really stands out as some of your favorite?
I would say One Tree Hill, which sounds like a weird one for stunts, but I worked on that for about 5 seasons, and that's kind of my home. That's kind of where a lot of stuff. I got the branch off. I worked in North Carolina, but in the studio, One Tree Hill was filmed in Wilmington. I got to do a lot of other projects, which Eastbound-and-Down was one of them. So One Tree Hill is kind of my home for just film and where everything branched off to. So that would probably be my favorite.
And I was curious, are you working on anything now, or like work with anybody? Do you teach other people how to do stunts, or how does that work?
I don't. I retired a couple years ago, and just deal with mental health now. Deal with athletes. Do some conventions every once in a while. I don't really want to get back into film. The only thing I would get back to film it is to have that character of like a Jason, or just not a lot of dialogue, but it's kind of the center of the horror film. I think that'd be freaking awesome. Kane Hodder is my idol, so something like that. But outside of that, I'm pretty much not doing film.
Gotcha.
With the transition from film into now going into psychology and helping athletes, how has that kind of changed your own mindset, your own mental health, dealing from I guess less threatening situations to now kind of being the person that's helping athletes in potentially those same types of situations?
I think it's hard for a psychologist or anyone to understand an athlete unless you were an athlete. And by athlete, I mean elite athlete. So you have to understand that mindset. And it's really hard for me to walk away from film. It was really, and it still is to this day, to not be a part of that, because that's always going to be a huge part of my identity, and just something I've always loved. It's been part of my life. So it's really hard to walk away from stunts, and knowing my body can't do it anymore really sucks. But I understand what athletes are going through, and I understand when they have the same thing where they can't continue in something that they spent their whole life trying to perfect. So it's kind of my bridge. It's kind of, I can't do stunts anymore, but this is a bridge to now I can work with other athletes and we can come together and figure out a good common ground of how to have a healthy mental life and just understand each other. And that's, I don't know, that's kind of my bridge that I have.
I follow a lot of like mixed martial arts and a bunch of mixed martial artists. I've actually trained with like Hoist Gracie and jiu-jitsu and things like that. And you hear a lot of them talk about seeing sports psychologists to help in various ways. Is that the kind of the work you do with athletes now, or is it something different, or what kind of work do you do with athletes?
It can be anything with athletes. I don't particularly work with martial arts. In particular, just I don't have any clients that do that. But it could be something from like if you guys, do you guys watch the NBA or basketball? Anybody?
I think Billy does.
Really? Okay. So like people that are struggling with shooting, I'm not going to say names, but people that were really good at one time and now they're very struggling at shooting now or something like that. It's mental because we already know these guys are so great. They're some of the best of all time, and now all of a sudden I can't shoot a basketball. So that's a lot of mental disconnection, like what's going on there. So I mean I can deal with football and basketball, baseball. I mean the main sports, but you know, someone with martial arts ever came across, I definitely deal with that.
Well, he already hit on mine, so go ahead, Josh.
I think with that, you know, kind of getting into the subject of sports psychology, you know, you mentioned earlier specifically about just not being able to do it anymore because, you know, you kept getting injured and it just eventually took its toll on you. But I feel like I'm always fascinated about what life looks like for people in certain fields, you know, like NFL. Like sometimes those guys go into, you know, sports commentary or they go into, you know, entrepreneurships. What was it particularly about the world of sports psychology that drew you to kind of switch careers and really kind of want to pursue more in the world of mental health versus film?
I think I knew I couldn't do film for the rest of my life. I don't want to do acting, and I knew stunts had a limited shelf life. So I knew I had to figure something out later in life to do. Psychology, I think with a lot of people that go into psychology, they want to understand themselves. I wanted to understand how I was working and how my brain works so I can help myself. And then later on, it's athletes. And I'll always be an athlete. And I can't work in film, so I'm going to work with athletes. And that's just something that, I don't know, I find a lot of enjoyment and a lot of fulfillment working with athletes and helping them in a way that I can come from my experience of doing this my whole life and come from the knowledge of psychology. Also, I sat in a trailer and did online schooling while everyone else was going to rap parties and everything. So I was always the boring one that does a lot of school.
What kind of advice do you have for anybody that might be thinking about doing this or just starting in this kind of career?
I think anything with film or any kind of arts is it's hard to make money. You have to be versatile. No, it is. I mean, that's the truth, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
there's not stunts every single day. I can't make a living just doing stunts. I mean, not a good living. But you know that I'm doing photo double work. I'm doing everyday on stand-in work. I'm doing a lot of other stuff. So you gotta know. That's what I'm saying with, you know, getting to do your own film and doing short film and getting to know the whole process of what film entails. So it's hard to make a living. I would have a backup plan. You gotta have a backup plan. Even if you get a big role, you might not get another one. So you always have to have a backup plan.
I laughed like specifically because I have a lot of friends that are in the world of film and that go exactly through that, where it's some days, some months and weeks, like they really struggle to like be able to like find a, you know, a job. So they're waiting tables or they're working at Starbucks or Walmart. Like you have to have something that is constantly like, you know, being in, like that is kind of the double-edged sword of being in the industry, is that you have to have a backup plan essentially.
Unfortunately, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I recently read an interview with, like I said, I follow mixed martial arts. One of the top 10. Actually, I think he's top 5. I think welterweights. Somebody started complaining that y'all need to pay him more because I saw him working in a steakhouse as a server,
Yeah.
and he's a top 5 athlete in this
Yeah.
division. And he actually came out and said, after seeing this, that I do that job to keep myself busy when I'm not training, because if I don't, then I have no income and I get myself in trouble when I'm left to my own devices.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, a lot of this, if you're lucky and you get to do it for as long as I have, and you get to work on 100 projects, and that's awesome. Most people don't get to do that, and I don't take that for granted. But you have to, even at that point, I'm beat up and old now, so I need to have another profession. But I started planning for that, a long time ago. So start planning and always have a backup plan. Have a really secure, set yourself up for your future, because a lot of times working in arts as an actor and anything in film tends to kind of be a hobby sometimes, just because you don't get paid a lot.
That seems to be what if you talk to a lot of older musicians compared to the newer ones, a lot of the older ones were known for their flashy lifestyles. And there's like accounts of like people from Quiet Riot working in gas stations now because they just didn't prepare for the future. And that seems to be the biggest takeaway, is do it while you can, have something else to pay your bills just to make sure, but also be smart about your long-term career.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. I mean, that's the best advice.
Yeah, and it wasn't just musicians. I've seen, sports and everything in that same boat. So,
or like, was it Lex Luger from wrestling is now in like a wheelchair?
Yeah,
because of all the injuries he sustained. So it's go ahead.
Go ahead. Even people that make millions and millions of dollars, sometimes they lose it and they don't have a profession to fall back on. So even if you're making a lot of money, you need that fallback plan.
What you got, Josh?
Okay.
You look like you're contemplating.
I have a question. I don't know if Billy has one yet.
Well, I had a statement. I was going to be, it would have been cool for him to, as a backup, just as a, when he, on his lull time, work at the theater and show up as the bunny man, just to show up. And then actually be
cool.
him.
That would be cool.
So go, Josh.
Obviously starting the career on something like Cabin Fever, Joe Blow did a great editorial at the beginning of this year on the production, just how small it was. Obviously, being constrained on such a micro budget for a film like Cabin Fever, how does stunt work vary from that into something where the budget's a little bit larger, even for a television show like Veronica Mars or Daredevil?
So when you talk about micro budget, we're talking about big production. So Cabin Fever had about $1.5 million budget. So if you're doing independent film, that sounds like a tremendous amount, and big production, that's very low budget. So you have to keep that kind of in mind. One Tree Hill, I think at the time, was doing about $3 million an episode, and then you go into Daredevil, that's doing millions and millions of episodes. So there's a lot of variance there. But doing stunt work on Cabin Fever, it is a very tight crew. I got to know the stunt coordinator that ended up being the stunt coordinator on One Tree Hill in Wilmington, and Cabin Fever was filmed in the woods in North Carolina. So you get those connections happen. So you got to always be on your toes of whoever you meet and make those connections. That's a huge part of the film industry. But doing stunts in that small environment, you have to be ready for everything. So you never know if Eli's going to change his mind and want to do this, or there's a new stunt we have to do, or something goes wrong and we have to think on the fly. So you have to be up for anything and not fear anything either.
It's interesting to look through your career and see some of the stuff you're in that's turned out to be kind of like almost not quite cult classic status, but things that have a solid following, like VHS.
Yeah, right.
Things like that in Cabin Fever. That's cool to see.
VHS the fun connection there is Cabin Fever 2 was directed by Ty West, who's done a few great horror movies, and he did a segment in VHS.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. That's fascinating. Yeah. I can end the call with one last question if no one else has a question.
You're good. You're good.
So my last question, honestly, would be, coming back to mental health. Obviously, between projects like this that are really harsh on your body or have the potential to be, for like days where you were taking care of, what were some of the self-care tactics that you would employ on yourself to make sure that your mental health was very intact when your physical health may not always have been?
Just touch on physical. There's not much you can do except even when in my old age, I get up and I decide, do I want to eat bad or do I want a better bite? So there's not a lot you can do physically there, but mentally, just my thing is you live for the day that you're in, and how am I doing this morning? Check in on the afternoon. Am I feeling a little depressed? Okay, well, how can I alleviate that, or how can I change my next couple hours to help that? So you celebrate whatever you do that day. So if you get at the end of the day and you were not feeling so great at breakfast and you got through it and you're feeling pretty good at dinner, you celebrate that. So you don't worry about Friday on a Monday. You celebrate Monday, you celebrate Tuesday. And if it wasn't a good Tuesday, how can I make Wednesday better? So every day at a time. Just take it a day at a time.
All right. Well, Preston, Bunnyman, Corbell, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
I'm an old man, so I only have one social media. It's stunt.beast. We're very positive over there. Everyone that's engaged in my page comments with each other and talks. So don't be afraid to come over there and be engaged in the content.
All right, Mark, where can people find you?
I'm actually going to be posting some updates soon from a finished project, doing model painting on Instagram.
He keeps saying that.
No, I'm actually doing the final touches on some prize support for a tournament back in Virginia, a major tournament in Virginia, for Infinity. But I'm going to get those pictures up probably by this weekend because I got to get them in the mail to my buddy. But it's titanium juggernaut painting on Instagram.
All right, Billy, where can people find you online?
Facebook, WTaber3.
All right, well, you guys can find me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can also follow our podcast, Abyss Gazing, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. And you guys, once again, can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from as well. Or you guys can just go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find all of that, including all of the shows on our podcast network, movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. Until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.